And now, opening our final theme, we have Paula Oliveira talking about epic trends. MP is the Chief Innovation Officer for EY Middle East and North Africa. Under her leadership, EY MENA was awarded the Most Innovative Knowledge Enterprise in 2019. And MP herself was presented with the Excellence in Innovation Award by the Women Leadership Awards in the Arab world in 2020. Additionally, she was recognized as one of the most influential corporate leaders in Singapore in 2017. Welcome, MP.
Thank you so much, Maria. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you, Andrea, as well. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all here. I can see myself twice now. I can see myself in Maria's screen. Andrea and Maria invited me to talk about mega trends, what Andrea called the epic trends. And I think they are really epic because they are the result of forces that are influencing the way we will behave, the way we work, the way we will live, the way we will read and write and eat and just live our lives in the next 5, 10, 15 years. What I'm going to present to you guys today is the result of a work done by my colleagues at EY in our EYQ, which is our think tank. And this work is part of our Megatrends report that was issued late last year. So it's a Megatrends 2020, but it's valid for the next 10 years. So Maria will share with you guys the link to this report, which is available for free. And I encourage all of you to go there and check the report out. It's really amazing. What I'm going to introduce to you today is just 3 of the megatrends that I selected, which are the ones that I think are going to influence the future, our future the most. It's the ones that I am most curious about. What I'm going to present is by no means a complete perspective on megatrends. It's just a glimpse to inspire you and to make you curious to understand the future a little bit more, since you're here in this event by Future Hacker. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and don't be scared by what you're going to be seeing. You're probably seeing right now a Miro screen, which is, Maria, I'm just going to move this down because I'm seeing 2 of myself and it's just driving me crazy. Okay, so I'm going to move this. And I just wanted to show you guys the structure of the presentation before we start. So I have 45 minutes here. So until, now it's 5 for me, 5 p.m. here in Brazil. Until 5:45, I'm gonna show you guys this material. I'm going to walk you, so think of this as a presentation on a page. I'm going to walk you through all the parts of the megatrends framework and explore with you some of the megatrends that I mentioned are the most interesting in my perspective. Then what we're going to be doing is having a discussion panel moderated by Guy Rangel. So that will be the last half an hour. So we're going to be together here for an hour and 15 minutes or so. If you have questions, please put them on the chat and then Guy will bring them up. And if we have a lot of you that are curious to discuss all of this, we will be doing this at the end. Right, Guy? Right, Maria? Awesome. So we're right on time. So like I said, this is a presentation on a page, okay? So bear with me. We're going to be zooming in and out here, and I'm going to explain to you first why we want to talk about megatrends, then how to apply this to your business. Then I'm going to go into primary forces, which are the technology, globalization, demographics, and environmental forces that are transforming and shaping the future. It is on the combination of these forces, multiples of them in different shapes and forms, that we find the megatrends. And when we talk about the mega trends, like I mentioned, I selected 3 of them, and I'm going to bring examples, real life, very recent examples of how they are already happening in our lives and how they will continue to happen and shape our future. All right, all here with me? Okay, so we're going to start this journey. First of all, what are megatrends, right? So when we're talking about megatrends, we're talking about a framework for understanding disruption, where it comes from, where it's headed, and what it means for you. And when I'm talking to you here, I'm talking to several parts of you. I'm talking to you as individuals. I'm talking to you as business leaders, as employees, as employers, and as the people who are going to be living in the future, and probably as the parents of the next generation who is going to be living in the future. So I wanted to be able to bring messages that resonate with each of those dimensions of anyone, each one of you guys. I hope I succeed. So why do we need to understand megatrends? Because all of us here, we are future thinkers. We're always trying to think and predict the future and build the businesses of the future. It is more important than ever that we talk about megatrends. And the reason is that at EY, we believe that the pandemic has offered us an opportunity to reset. Malala, I forgot how to say her last name, the lady that stood up against the Taliban in Pakistan. She said, we shouldn't be looking for a recovery, we should be looking for a reset. Because a recovery means we're going back to the way we were before. And in a lot of ways, the way we were before, if we take here a post-war, post-Second World War curve, and then globalization, and then the technology boom, we could see that we were in a curve that was turning to go down. A lot of the things that we did in the last decades were starting to hurt us as individuals and hurt the world where we live in. So I welcome you guys to reflect on this moment as a reset, an opportunity for us together as society in Brazil, in the UAE, in the US, or wherever you are, to think of how can we take this moment of personal reflection, societal reflection, and reset into a better working world curve. So we go on a path that is more sustainable than in the path that we were before, which is not sustainable. The issue that we're facing right now in July 2021 is that the world is in rapid change, and it was before, but now we have tremendous uncertainty. It's more uncertain than it was before. And that's why it's really important to understand the future, not as a way of predicting it, but as a way of envisioning it and criticizing it. Is this the future that we want? If not, how can we do our job today to change some of the things? So you're going to see that some of the trends that I'm going to present to you might be a bit gloomy, and we're going to be talking about this during the panel, but they are more than predictions, they are provocations. They're here to provoke you to think and to reflect of your role in this future and what you can do today to shape the future if you wanted to go in that direction, if you wanted to go in a different direction. What you can see here, and I'm just going to zoom this a little bit more, is EY's framework for a future back planning. So what we propose to our clients, and we propose to all of you here, is that you as business leaders try to think of what is the future that you expect will happen, and then you pull back and design the transformation now that you want to see in your business, in your career, in your families, in your society. So this is the future back planning that we propose. And to support you guys to do that, I'm going to take you now through the primary forces and the megatrends. I hope these first minutes were clear. If there's any question about this framework, please put them in the chat, and I will answer and address them during our chat later in the session. So let me see if you can see. I think I can see your screen here. All right. So we're going to be talking now about this left part of my screen, which is the primary forces. We at UI believe there are 4 primary forces at the root cause that are the root causes of disruption. Okay, so those primary forces are technology, globalization, demographics, and environment. I'm going to go into each one of them now to show to you guys what are the things that will be changing in each of them and how they will be shaping the world of the future. So when we talk about technology, let me just zoom in here. I know you can see lots of numbers, and I'm going to explain them to you. We're talking about technology, and the key thing here, the key movement that we see is that technology will be powering human augmentation. It means that technology will not be replacing humans, but it will rather be empowering humans and augmenting humans. Before I go into the data, I wanted to share a little story with you. I'm here in Brazil visiting my family, and my dad has a medical practice here in the countryside of Brazil, where most of his patients come from the sugarcane plantations, the sugarcane harvest here in Brazil. When he started this practice about 35, 40 years ago, most of his patients were the population, the people, mainly men, who were coming to harvest the sugarcane by hand and then process it on the sugar industry and the alcohol industry, the ethanol industry. Then we drove by recently and I looked at it and I said, where are the workers? And he said, well, they're all replaced by machines right now. There are no workers. And then I asked him and said, wow, but that must have really impacted your medical practice, because I think if there are no workers, there are no patients for you. And then he reflected and is like, no, that's not true. The majority of the workers were retrained and now they are operating the machines. They're operating the machines that harvest the sugarcane. They're operating the machines within the industry that process the sugarcane. So it was really interesting for me to see this trend that we fear a lot, that will be a replacement of the human work, is already happening as a augmentation of the human work. Because to be honest, working in the harvest of sugarcane is a work that should not be done by humans, because it is really, really hard. So if a machine can do, but we can still employ humans to do that, it is much better for everybody. So this is what I want to talk about. There are a few things that UI is tracking that show how the future will be different when technology empowers and augments the human abilities. The first one that we talk about is 5G. For most of you, 5G is starting to become a reality. In the UAE where I live, it's starting to become a reality. In the US, where I have a lot of friends, it's more or less a reality right now. Here in Brazil, it's a new thing. But the important thing is that 5G is at its beginning right now. It's not where its full potential lies. The data speed and the devices connected in 5G will grow more than 100 times in the next few years. We're talking 3-5 years here. With 5G, we're going to have 1/10 of the delay and the energy use that we have right now. So even on this presentation, we have little bits of delays with people who play games or people who are on critical mission applications. This delay is not acceptable anymore, and 5G will bring the speed that is required for a almost live experience. The 5G connections will grow. So we are in 2021. In 2025, it will reach 1.4 billion people, or billion connections, okay? From 0.1, like 100 million connections in 2023, and a much smaller number today. So 5G is one of the things that will augment the human capacity. The second thing is edge computing. I don't know if all of you are familiar with edge computing, and I'm not going to go technical here, but it's really important that 54% of respondents in one of the surveys that we did responded that they need edge computing to manage AI. So artificial intelligence, this ability to have machines and computers creating new intelligence and creating new things and being almost as intelligent as a human being, this is dependent on us having edge computing, because edge computing together with 5G reduces latency because it brings the processing, it removes the processing from the cloud and it brings the processing to our devices or closer to our devices. And when it does that, it reduces latency, it increases speed, it enables technologies such as artificial intelligence, virtual reality, augmented reality, and it requires 10% of the energy that is now consumed to process data and applications on the cloud. We estimate that within the next 3 years, this market will reach $9 billion, which is a very big number. The third thing, so we talked about 5G, we talked about edge computing. The third thing that I want to talk to you about in terms of technology is sensors. We have dozens and dozens of sensors in one cell phone or in a computer, and there are sensors all around us. And they create data and they help us to manage our lives better and our businesses better. We predict that the global sensor market by 2025 will be $287 billion. We see that the application of sensors will increase critical applications, critical jobs like, for example, detecting COVID-19. And we believe that we will have quantum sensors, which are much more sensitive than the sensors that we have now. So sensors is the third technology that will also impact our future. And again, I think those three technologies are right in their beginning right now. We will see exponential, that's my personal perspective, we will see exponential development on those technologies in the next 5 years. The fourth one is batteries. We know how batteries are important, and the more we see the advancements in batteries, again, for our cell phones, for our cars, for our houses, for industries, we see how batteries are becoming much more prevalent when we expect, for example, our batteries in the phone to last for more than 24 hours. The good thing is that the cost to produce batteries has declined a lot and will continue to decline from what we have now to less than 85%, a reduction in 85% of this in the next few years. We believe that the storage, although the cost is decreasing, the storage power is increasing, and we're going to have 122 times the storage market that we have now, with a projected investment of $620 billion by 2024. So this is the fourth piece of the technology that will influence us. The fifth one is quantum computing. So the ability to program the computer or to have computers that are not based in bits and bytes, but are based in the quantum mechanics and the quantum engineer that can reduce, for example, the processing time of preclinical drug tests from 5 years, which is right now, to 4 months. And we predict that there will be a lot of investment and a lot of growth on this in the next 5 years. Only in the EU, the European Union, the Quantum Computing Initiative is pledging $1.1 billion in investments. So this is technology, okay? I love technology, so I'll probably not extend so much into the other primary forces as I did on technology. But I wanted you guys to have some of this data to reflect on as you think about the future. The second primary force that I want to talk to you about is globalization. I think most of us in this call now are on the late 30s, most early 40s range of age here. And we've lived and we've grown in a world where one of the operative words was globalization. How can we make more connections with the world? How can we make more international trade? How can we reduce the barriers between countries? The thing is that this was the trend for the last 3-4 decades, at least, very strongly. But with every trend comes a counter trend. With every wave comes a counter wave. So the counter wave that we're living now is the nationalism and the populism. Because globalization means that the power is in the network. It's not in one individual, it's not in the US or in Brazil or in China, but the power is on the network of trade that is created between these countries. And what we've seen in the last few years is a surge in populism and nationalism, meaning that countries are taking one step back, looking into globalization and thinking, is this what is really good for me? Some are rethinking their participation in global groups like the UK leaving the European Union with Brexit. Some countries are going for more nationalistic leaders, like the US with Trump, and some other countries with more with presidents and leaders that say our country first instead of the network. So I see right now, as a futurist, I see that those two trends are going to mellow and they're going to find a more balanced approach. But the reality is, right now in July 2021, we are really going through a counter wave to the globalization wave. That's why what we write here is that the future goes beyond globalization. It's really hard to say where it's going to go, but I just have some data to show to you here. We've been hearing a lot about trade wars. In the last 3 years, between January 2018 and January 2020, China and US have both raised their barriers to the commerce, to the trade between themselves. Chinese average tariff on US exports rose from 8% to 25.1% in 2 years' time. On the counter movement in the US, the tariff on Chinese exports rose from 3% to almost 24%, which is a very representative number, but it's even a more representative indication of the intentions and the government plan of those countries. Those are countries that are definitely trying to be more self-sustaining than depending on each other. And that is really interesting because we believe regionalization and localization could be the shape of the future. This is the share of cross-border supply chain inputs from the same region. So we're talking about nations, but what we're proposing here is also that you talk about regions. So when you look in the EU, around 47% in, let's say, 2018 here, of the EU supply chain was coming from a cross-border country. Now it's almost 55%. So we see the same in Asia and we see the same in North America. So in terms of the social order of the global social order, it's really important that we have those two counter trends in mind: the globalization, which still is the order of the international trade, but also the nationalization and regionalization that could be things that are mellowing down the impulses of globalization a bit. I hope that was clear. I hope I'm not getting too complicated. I'm going to go to a point now that I think it's really interesting. And I think it applies to all of us. I was talking about our age group and where I think we are. I would suspect a lot of us listening to this call are Gen Zs or even millennials, but I am a Gen Z. And what is interesting is, sorry, I'm a Gen X, and then we have the millennials and then the Gen Z, sorry. I'm a Gen X, and I think a lot of you guys will be a Gen X or a millennial. But the interesting thing here is that we pay attention to the Gen Z. And this goes way beyond the cringe and the memes and the okay boomer fun that happens when the age groups, they clash, the generations clash. It goes way beyond that. The importance of Gen Z, it's not that they are the teenagers or the post-teenagers that are thinking and behaving very different than us, but the importance is that they're going to be the biggest cohort of the age group in the next 5 to 10 years. So right now, the Gen Xers are 1.4 billion people. The millennials were a very big group, but they represent 1.7 billion people. And then the Gen Zs are 1.8 billion people. And the really interesting thing about this is that they're not all the same. They're not distributed the same, and they're not subjected to the same future. And that's what I wanted to show to you guys. This is a distribution of the generations, older millennials, Gen Z, and the new generation, which is basically our kids, in the youthful countries and in the aging countries. In the youthful countries, you have a prevalence here of Gen Zs, meaning that these are the people that will really shape the economy, the communications, the healthcare, the business, and the politics of these countries. On the other hand, you have aging countries where the biggest age group is still the older generations, the boomers, the silent generation, or even us, the Gen Xers. So this is important because this drives politics, this drives policy, this drives economics, and this drives businesses. So if you're doing business in Indonesia, you should have a very different strategy than if you're doing business in Japan or in the US. Another interesting reflection here that I wanted to share with you guys is how they are distributed around the world in terms of comparing this with vulnerability and high vulnerability and low vulnerability. And the vulnerability I'm talking about here is the vulnerability to climate change, because this is the next trend, the next primary force I'm going to talk about. Climate change is a global thing, but it will impact countries very differently. And what is interesting to see is that if you look at the countries that are highly vulnerable to climate change, yet have low readiness to climate change, which is the light blue one, that's where the Gen Z is. So we're going to have a young population subject to a very intense climate change in the next decades, with very low readiness to combat this climate change. Here in Brazil, we're in the middle, but also we're in the middle in terms of the size of the population of the Gen Zs. But if you look in India or if you look in China, those are countries that are not ready for climate change, but that will have the biggest contingent of people in the Gen Z cohort. I just want to pause here, drink a sip of water, let this sink with you. And now I wanted to go to our fourth primary force and the last one that I'm going to talk before we go into the megatrends. I'm just checking the time. I still have about a little less than 20 minutes, so we're good to go. The next one is environment. The thing about environment that I wanted to share with you guys, it is not about the icebergs. Not that I don't care that the icebergs are going to melt. The problem is that as climate changes and the world gets hotter, it creates tremendous impact for us as humans. Not because we cannot see the icebergs anymore, but because the global weather related economic losses and economic impact, it's greater than ever. And that impacts us if we're close to the iceberg or if we're not close to the iceberg. So I wanted you guys to start thinking, I started thinking about climate change differently when I realized that it is really impacting and will impact people that are close to the iceberg and not close to the iceberg. Global weather-related economic losses have grown from the early 2000s from $1.5 trillion here, okay, to $2.5 trillion in the last 10 years, or the 10 years before the last 10 years. And in the last 6 years, we've had the 6 hottest years since 1880. So we've been having a world record after world record. In 2016, we had the hottest year. 2019 was the second hottest. So it is really clear that the world's getting hotter. And what is the impact? The impact is on our way of life. Extreme heat will cause more than 80 million people to lose their jobs, or the equivalent to 80 million jobs. People who live in desertifying areas will reach 500 million people in the next few years. Migration, this one is super relevant, because if you live in an area that is not subject to climate change, guess what? You're getting people migrating to your area. And you cannot complain about that, because people will be looking not as an organized migration, but as a trickle of people that will change the shape of countries and the shape of the world in the next years. And we're going to have people migrating within borders by 2050, 143 million people. People who live in areas subject to coastal flooding by 2050 are more than 300 million people. So this is the impact of climate change that I wanted you guys to have in mind. All right, I have 15 minutes more. I'm gonna go fast here because I wanna talk to you guys about 3 megatrends: Techonomic Cold War, behavioral economy, and the future of thinking. Let me go into the first one. So remember that the megatrends are the intersections between the primary forces. What we see when we bring technology and nationalism together is the Techonomic Cold War. We see that populism, trade wars, company blacklists, and a technology arms race, and cyber attacks and informational warfare are all creating a new Cold War. A Cold War that is permanent, it's bloodless, it's invisible, but it's really happening, and it's happening on a national level, and it's happening on a company level. Because guess what? Countries are not competing anymore on how they can militarily combat one another or hurt one another. They are using proxy companies to wage those wars. So I'll give you some examples here. Huawei, 2 years of a ban in the US. And this is very, very much related to the 5G technology that we talked before. TikTok was banned by Trump. Biden is easing on the ban, but still keeping his eyes open. And companies, 59 Chinese companies have been blacklisted, and American businesses cannot do businesses with them. So countries are using companies to hurt one another. This list here is a list of companies that are banned in China. So US bans Chinese companies, China bans US companies, and so we go. On top of that, countries, companies, and third parties are using cyber technology to do cyber attacks and cyber hacks, and they are disrupting the energy sector, they're disrupting the healthcare sector. So technology is a tool. It can be used for good, it can be used for connection, it can be used for automation, but it can also be used to wage this economic cold war. The last thing that I wanted to mention here is the political implication of this. I don't know if you all watch this documentary called The Great Hack on Netflix. It talks about the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And the interesting thing is that I was rewatching parts of it the other day to prepare for this presentation. And the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, in one of their institutional videos, talk about them as a behavioral change agency. So they're not an advertising agency, they're not a marketing company, they're a behavioral change agency. And that drives us to the second megatrend, which is behavioral economy. So behavior economy, we say at EY, if you think data is the new oil, then behavior is the new data. Because with technology, behavior will be commoditized, will be commercialized, will be traded. And if you think that your behavior is immune to that, I would urge you to think again. So Cambridge Analytica, they talk about themselves, or they talked about themselves as a behavior change agency. They are gone, but there are many more behavioral change agencies right now. And what they use is the power of technology to influence our behavior. So instead of selling your eyes and for example, when I studied marketing, we would sell the positioning of a product in a shelf because we wanted it to be at eye level, because we knew that if people were seeing, they would more likely buy. What we can do with effective computing right now, it's really apply technology to change behavior. And then you can commercialize, you can trade, you can commoditize, you can monetize the behavior, not the eyes. And this is really powerful. So I'll give you an example of how this was used. Also with Cambridge Analytica, they did several political campaigns. One of the ones that they did was for Trinidad Tobago. Trinidad Tobago has a population that is divided between Indians and the Black population. Cambridge Analytica was working with and for the Indian party. But what they realized is that they did not need to tell the Indian people to go vote, because the parents of the Indian people are very proud of their social duties and they would tell their kids to go and vote. Rather, what Cambridge Analytica did was use data and social media to influence the Black population not to vote. So they created a guerrilla campaign called Do So, which was a slogan for people to rise against the government and not vote. So they were not telling people to vote to the Indian party, because that wouldn't happen, but they were trying to create vote suppression. So they created this, they used the power of influence that social media has, and people from the Black community started themselves reposting and creating their videos, and they created a movement for the Black people not to vote. So in this sense, they're not sending a message with the marketing, with the traditional marketing perspective, telling people to do something, but they are actually influencing the behavior of people, even if it's for them to tell them not to do something. The way effective computing works is another technology so we talked about data and social media, so I want to talk about effective computing. And it is another technology that can be used in our phones, in call centers, in many interfaces that we have with technology that can trigger us into having emotional reactions, creating an emotional state. The way it's done, for example, is if you call your bank and they have an automated system, there's probably an effective computing technology behind it, that if you start shouting to the machine and start saying, I want to talk to a representative now. They will route your call to a more experienced attendant, representative, because they've identified in your voice that you're angry. Now imagine that this attendant is not a human, but rather another computer powered by AI. And the system recognizes that your accent is from Brazil and your voice is a female. And then the AI transforms instantly in a female Brazilian person that's going to say, hi, Ms. Oliveira, how can I help you? I see you're very upset. And instantly, I am going to be driven to have more empathy with that artificial intelligence than with a different voice. So this is the power of effective computer. This is the power of social media. This is the power of data that will shape how we will behave in the future. And because of those two trends that I showed to you guys, and I just want to use the last few minutes to talk about the future of thinking. Because in a world where we have technology that shapes our behavior, and we have this invisible, bloodless war happening across our politics and businesses and cyber attacks, how do we think and how do we behave in this new world? So one of the mega trends that EY has is called the future of thinking. So I know all of you, and I've shown to you my phone multiple times in this presentation, and it's not by mistake. It's because our phone is close to us all the time. It has sensors that track our data. It has applications, apps that are designed for addiction, and it connects us to the world, but not to the whole world. It connects us to our world, and it puts us in filter bubbles in which we are manipulated by algorithms of amplification. So when we look at all of that, I would ask you guys to reflect, encourage you guys to reflect, what is the future of thinking? Because if I am thinking what everybody else is thinking, and if I'm addicted to my phone, if I am presented with deepfake videos or deepfake images, how will I think? How will I, as an individual, as a worker, as an employer, and as a consumer, will be able to make decisions that I can stand behind? So what we see here is the confluence of technology. So we have artificial intelligence, we have synthetic media, I'll talk a little bit about this, and we have deep fake and other technologies that might transform not only the external world where we live, but the internal world where we live. I was just listening to a podcast by Sam Harris just before I came, called The Future of Intelligence. And he and his interviewee were talking about how our neurons, especially in the prefrontal cortex, which is 70% of our brain's mass, how the neurons are always creating a model of the world and predicting actions and being ready for actions when they need. How will this world in which we have all this technology changing the reality in front of us, how will we think, and how will this change the way our brain works? So I want to share with you guys here something. My son, Noah, who is 6 years old, came to me the other day and said, "Mommy, I saw something." And I said, "Oh, why do you think this is true?" And he said, "Mom, it is true because I saw on TV." And then I started showing to him deep fake videos. So I don't know if you guys seen this. It's not the best one, but it's a very interesting one. I would encourage you guys to Google. I'm not going to have time to present it here, but it's Jordan Peele, a comedian, making a deep fake video of Barack Obama and showing how he could put words in the face of Barack Obama. This is another deepfake content in which you have a Caucasian woman, but if you are advertising this vase or whatever she's selling here in an Asian country, why not just change the model to an Asian face? And it is quite convincing. So the reflection here, I got this from a Bloomberg Quick Takes, but I thought it was really interesting, is in a world where where fakes are easy to create, authenticity also becomes easier to deny, because you can see a video and not know if it's deep fake. But also imagine that you see a video of a politician receiving a bribery, or somebody having an affair or something like that. And that person says, no, not me. This is a deep fake video. This is fake news. So you can create fake, but because you can create fake, you can also deny things that are authentic. And that is quite scary, isn't it? So just wanted to close here with sharing this with you. Synthetic media is being applied right now for brands and retailers across everything that we can hear, read, write. You can have synthetic images, you can have synthetic videos, you can have synthetic audio, you can have text created by machines and text changed by machines. You can have avatars, digital humans, virtual try-ons, 3D body scanning, holograms, virtual environments, like the background behind me. So in this world where we have some of these trends that can be really scary, I'm not telling you again that they are predictions, but they are provocations. If this is not the world you want to see in the future, then you have to work today to change that. And the question that I put for you here and to end my presentation is, are you reframing the future, or is the future reframing you? And again, you as an individual, as a parent, as a kid, as an employee, as an employer, as a member of the society. Are you reframing the future, or is the future reframing you? Thank you very much.
MP, thank you very much. The challenge is to open our eyes and our minds about epic trends. Now, to lead the last debate of our event, we have Guy Rangel. Guy is a futurist, advisor, keynote speaker, professor, and experienced designer. In 2021, he was chosen one of the 50 most influential voices in AR and VR in the world, being a futurist speaker at events such Side by South, etc. Welcome, Guy. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you very much, Maria. And the great thing about being presented in an international event, when Brazilians say my name, is that they can say it correctly, Guy Rangel. Because when I was outside Brazil, they would say, is Guy Rangel? Is it Rangel? Rangel? So I feel at home now. So thank you very much for the opportunity. It was amazing. And following the conversations today, it makes me feel like, man, it's like, you know the character from Game of Thrones, Ygritte? She used to whisper at Jon Snow's ear, you know nothing, Jon Snow. Man, it's fantastic. There are so many great insights here to share, to provoke, to change our minds. And now, after MP opened our eyes for this amazing mega trends, or epic trends, as we're calling them, we have a lot of stuff to share, a lot of things to provoke and to change as we go. And we have here at me two great people to join MP, and it seems that everybody has a P in their names. There's JP, AP, and MP. So I'd like first JP Mello to introduce himself, to tell us a little bit about himself, because it's more interesting Guy doing that, because I don't have a P in my name. JP, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Maria, as well, MP, for the great presentation. I do have the same issue that you have, Guy, as being a Brazilian here in the US. I call myself JP Mello because my real name is João Paulo Albuquerque Mello. The Americans go crazy, so it's much easier to put myself as JP Mello, right? So I lead sports media and entertainment for Cisco. I worked for Cisco for 13, going to 14 years now. I began my career as an entrepreneur when I was 21 years old. I've been, pre-bubble burst of the internet. I programmed computers when I was 8 years old. I love technology. I love thinking about the future. But most importantly, I love learning how to think about the future. And this is what I'm doing, investing my time today. Today, I saw great presentations, including yours, MP, before the other two that we were able to watch today. And also, I really look into not only sports, media, and entertainment on how we can shape the future of the industry, but also how can we shape ourselves, as how to Maria was portraying her last comments. Are we reframing our future, or is the future reframing us, right? So we're here to try to reframe the future ourselves. And I'm very honored and happy to be here, Guy. Thank you so much.
Great job, Paulo. Very good, man. Now it's time for Ari Popper, or AP, the guy that has science fiction in his blood, just like me. So, Ari, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Guy. MP, thank you for a fantastic presentation, really stimulating. I know how difficult it is to create something super engaging and compelling when there's so much complexity and so many signals out there, and you did a phenomenal job. Thanks for that. Yeah, and JP, great to be on this panel with you. So I'm Ari Popper, I'm AP. I'm the founder and CEO of SciFutures, and we're a foresight and innovation firm working mostly with Fortune 500s around the world. And we use science fiction and storytelling to help them create their preferred futures, exactly what MP was saying. Don't let the future define you, you can define it. So I think what we all have is a passion for understanding the forces and the signals around it, and then figuring out what kind of future do we want? How can we create a preferred future for all of us, not just for the companies that we work for, but for the entire planet, for our species. And as we saw from MP's presentation, there are some big challenges ahead of us, big existential challenges. As human beings, who do we want to be? What do we want to stand for? What do we value? And these are the sorts of questions that drive me and that I'm really interested in solving with the work that I do as well. So I'm excited to talk more about this, and I'm honored to be here.
Great. Thank you very much, AP. So I'd like to start asking you guys a question. After MP's presentation, we felt, I think I felt this rather bleak feeling about this oncoming trends. There's a lot of threats, a lot of, I don't know, risks involved in the adoption of these technologies, the way they're changing our society. So let's see in a more holistic way. What are the most exciting trends that you feel? How do you feel about them, and which ones are scare you and even terrify you? Please, JP, start with you. Yeah, what do you have in your mind?
Sure, I'll portray this over the industry that I'm responsible today here in the Americas, right? So I would say there's a lot, between mega stadiums and how they're changing themselves with, different experiences within the stadiums, multi-purpose spaces, going to, very near future on flexible screens, holograms, volumetric streaming media, AI, robots. So I think the in-venue experience is something that it's exciting me, because this has been a long-term, non-innovative existence, in a way that from the Coliseum up to what we have now, it's somewhat similar, the relationship that we have on an in-venue experience, as well as the out-of-venue experience, if you will. So what excites me on that way, which can bring also the best of both worlds, is a lot of the AR, VR immersion that we're seeing here, talking about metaverse, Ready Player One type of engagements, the advancements of these engagements, hyper surfaces. Don't know if you've heard of that, but there's a discovery around how you can use whatever type of surfaces to engage into a more immersive experience throughout these, rather usual surfaces, but using technology to do so. And a lot of the aspects around technology that we can, paint the picture here for hours on esports becoming the next, the future of leagues. Again, music and education. MP was talking about the experiences on synthetic media and deep fakes, on how we should be aware. But that also can, open a lot of windows when you talk about, think about how you can interact with personalities that simulate their mannerisms and intelligence in a way that you can interact with them in an immersive way. So like us, right? We love music. So I play the drums, you play the guitar. Imagine us having a jam session with our favorite musician or band, dead or alive, that, has their mannerisms using, all of these technologies and engagements that we're seeing today, but in the future, so we can really play, I don't know, with Led Zeppelin in a real live, immersive, Ready Player One type of situation. So that is what excites me overall about the future and all the technology that can bring to it. And what scares me in another way is, I think, how we can, be concerned, or should be concerned about cybersecurity. And that is a real threat. So we're talking about how can we protect our digital selves, right? I think Itai Talmi talked about on his Quantum Anarchy presentation in the beginning about dataism. So how can we protect our own IP, our own intellectual property? And cyber is in the top of that concern that I personally have. And, reaching out to MSP presentations on economic Cold Wars and the new Cold War type of engagement. So that is my take on both.
Great. What about you, AP? What about the science fiction in you tells us about this crazy future we have ahead of us?
Yeah, so what excites me is, I think as human beings, as a species, we're kind of unfinished. So if you think about us, the way we've evolved is, we've still got this primitive kind of hardwire and kind of primitive wiring that was maybe really well suited to life 2,000 years ago. But now we're operating in a world where everything is augmented and digitized, and our emotions, the way we interact with each other, can be hacked quite easily. It can be manipulated quite easily because we're kind of still evolving. So actually, what excites me is, I think that technology in particular, and AI in particular, can augment and improve the human species, and kind of help us optimize ourselves in a way that maximizes our potential as a compassionate, empathetic, beneficial species. So I'll give you a good example of that. We're driving in the car and somebody cuts us off, and all of a sudden we have the tremendous rage, road rage, right? And we want to literally kill the person. We've never met the person, but we want to kill the person. And that's hardwired. That's something biological. Not everyone does that, but some people do, and they can't believe it. It's almost like they lose their mind. So I believe that technology can help us know ourselves and optimize ourselves, and allow us to be more compassionate, more empathetic, more in tune with our feelings and with each other, to understand how other people feel. And MP spoke about effective computing and emotion AI. And already today, we can understand how people feel and measure their moods and understand how they're feeling. So there's a lot of potential there to improve us as a species. So I'm particularly excited about that. On the downside, of course, there's a lot to be terrified about. And in some ways, we're kind of living through some of that through the polarization that we have, this kind of silos that we're operating, this extreme fear and the way we've been manipulated. And also, obviously, with things like Cambridge Analytica, where we can see how powerful and how influential technology in the wrong hands or with the wrong intent can be used. But on the flip side of that, I think there's a lot of opportunity using technology as well to help us understand what is authentic, what is a deep fake. And I think it'll just create new business challenges and new innovation challenges. I also am pretty excited about blockchain. I think it's a technology that really can help us get a lot more transparency and kind of decentralize information and give us control. So there's some companies that I'm interested in that are looking at flipping social media model on its head. So moving away from, we take all the data, we own it all, and we basically, you're the product. We give it away for free, but you're the product. to actually you get to decide what data you share, and you get to decide what gets paid for, and how it gets used. And I think there's a lot of innovation that's going to happen in those spaces too. But obviously it's a complex space. There's no black or white, it's very gray. But I think where we work at Site Futures is we can create stories and use science fiction writers to help us imagine these intended and unintended consequences of the world that we live in, to kind of figure out what kind of future we want and then work towards that.
Fantastic. What about you, MP? What's the bright side about the big trends?
Okay, so just before I go there, Guy, I just wanted to make a few comments on what JP and Ari said. So
Right.
JP, you mentioned about sports and the possibilities that technology brings. It was really interesting. I was with my parents and my son watching part of the Tokyo 2020 yesterday. And there was somebody in gymnastics and the person fell. And my son, who is 6, he said, "Oh, good thing that it's just a practice." And then I said, "No, this is the real competition, not a practice." And then he's like, "Oh, but there's nobody in the audience." And it was so interesting because I knew there wouldn't be people in the audience. He didn't. And for him, the paradigm is people in the audience is an event. People not in the audience is a practice. And it's funny because he's not very much into sports, but he knew just that. And I think JP, he will grow up in a world where this paradigm will be shifted, will be, you can be at home and be as much part of the event and of the sports or the music concert or the theater show that you are watching from home. So I think it's a shift of paradigm that will impact his generation tremendously. And Ari, you mentioned something about cars and emotions, and this is already a feature that is being built in cars, which is a car that can sense, with the sensors revolution that I talked about, can sense if you're tired, if you're happy and play happy music, or if you're angry and then just like lock the doors and don't let you out in a road rage situation, but really sense you and reflect back to you and say, "Hey, I think you're frustrated because you're really speeding right now. Do you want to talk about it?" You know, like with a very friendly voice. So Guy, to answer to your question, I think I tend to flip those things around and look at the technology, especially in ways that it can create more empathy and it can create more inclusion. Because if you think of, for example, populations that are excluded, and that you can maybe use technology for people to feel more included on a conversation or in an interface, I think this is a bright side. But I always come back to what Ari said at the end about the unintentional consequences, because a lot of what we have now that has shaped and created the paradigms of our generation, for example, Twitter, Facebook, they were created, and I want to believe that, with the best intentions in the world, and not to be systems of algorithms of amplification that are amplifying fake news and are amplifying lies and are amplifying hate. But they were not created by that. But the sheer fact that they were created makes it possible for bad actors to use them exactly as they were intended to be used. You know, so what is a feature and what is a bug of the technology is a more philosophical discussion that would take us much longer than what we have now. But I try to see what are the pieces of technology that can create empathy and can create inclusion. Those are the things that I like to see in my future.
Great, that's fantastic. Because when I see technology, my way of understanding it is that the pace of revolutions, of changing, is accelerating, and the way we adopt them, it's way faster than our capacity of understanding their moral, ethical, social, economical, environmental implications. So we deal with that later. We had no idea when we were adopting blindly the mobile phone technology that this would change our lives. They had no idea that the social media would have such an influence in our behavior. And everything that is happening this way, deep fakes or whatever, big data being used to understand our behavioral metrics to change them. And I remember, it's funny, because just like MP is doing now, living in Dubai, I lived in Dubai for a while. And I understood the power of big data in a magician's show. Every year in Dubai, there was this big show that several magicians would perform live, each one with a different style. The guy would do some card tricks. The other one would do the disappearance acts. He would stay here and then he would appear the other way around. The other guy would do the Houdini thing. He would be in handcuffs, chains, inside the safe, thrown inside the swimming pool, and he would escape somehow. But my favorite one was the mentalist. And the mentalist is the guy that can figure things out about you. He's always one step ahead. He discovers things about the way you're thinking. It's amazing. And the thing is, I was there, watching, and a couple's daughter, our friend's daughter, was invited to join the audience on stage. Great. So they would sit in 5 chairs. You have 5 volunteers. And the guy would perform the tricks. Amazing. He would do stuff that would make me feel like, is there something supernatural happening? But no, it's tricks. Great. In the end, he would give them a pen, each one of them a pen, a piece of paper, and ask them to write on the paper a number from 1 to 100. They would do that and show to the audience. Great. And then say, oh, now stand up. Now turn your chairs upside down. And there, under the seat, there was a number. Come on, what's going on? Wait, but it doesn't stop there. When we arrived at the hall, they would give us a bag with 5 postcards, each one with a picture of one of the magicians. Great. And then he asked us, okay, now take the 6 cards and just rip them in half and put them back inside the bag. Great. We would do that and say, now without looking, just pick 2 random parts. And man, I can tell you, at least 97% of the people, including this guy here, picked 2 parts that would fit. And I would say, what the hell, man? What this guy was doing is just understanding human behavior. He had some limited access to data about our behavior, and he would know how to, which buttons to push in order to get this expected behavior. Now imagine that each person right now, let's go back 20 years in the past. 20 years ago, each person on the planet Earth would generate 240 megabytes of data each year. The experts would say, we are being drowned by data. Wow. Now, in 2020, I don't have updated results. Each person produces 240 megabytes of data every 2.5 minutes. I think it's an increase of 20 million%. Now imagine integrating this amount of data that is being produced with this synthetic agents that can get some understanding, some knowledge of our behavior and how to push buttons. They would go much deeper than we can even imagine. So there's a huge risk and huge opportunities as well to create value and also to nudge us toward a future that we don't want to happen. So it's up to us to be the protagonists of creating a framework to protect our journey. I have to go with the futurist look that you're talking about. You're involved. It's part of this journey, but including more and more people in this process is at least it's my biggest goal, my passion. Great. So let's go forward. I'd like to ask one for Ari, that you use science fiction in this process to visualize the future, to accelerate and prototyping the future. Tell us a little bit about it, Ari.
Yeah, by the way, yeah, I love that example. It's such a profound indicator of how much power you have when you have information and when you use that information in an intelligent way. It's quite frightening when you think of it that way. So what do we do? Well, when you're trying to figure out where the world should be or could be in 5 to 10 years, it's difficult because it's complex. There's lots of different forces. It's ambiguous. It's not clear on what's going to happen. There's a lot of forces that kind of work in synergistically with others. So you can't just consider AI, you have to consider AI within the context of immersive technologies, within the context of all the cool technologies that MP refer to. And so it's quite challenging. But yeah, with storytelling, you know, story is one of our oldest technologies. It's how we make sense of the world. It's how we communicate with each other. It's how we create an emotional connection to content. Now, I like to say stories is data with soul. So what we do is we use sci-fi writers, grounded in the science, the facts, the emerging technologies, the forces of change, to speculate about the futures that we would like. And in that process, we get clarity, we get context, and we get connection with the futures that we want. And it's also a very creative process too. So by imagining the future and storytelling into that future, you can also create the sort of futures you want. Yeah, so it's a very powerful process. The outcome can be great narratives of the future or even high fidelity storytelling like videos or whatever. But actually just going through that process is enlightening, because rather than passively having information onboarded, you actively process it. And that gives you power, gives you agency over what you choose to do. And that's what we do. Hopefully that explains clearly for you. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I love the fact that you use storytelling to connect people with these possible futures, because we have this barrier. Our brains are not wired to connect to our future selves.
That's right.
So we are very myopic when it comes to understanding the future. We are guided by KPIs, OKRs, and we fail to see the long-term story we're creating. How do you bring that to your life, MP?
I just wanted to mention. I just wanted to mention that you said we're bad about predicting the future, creating the future. One thing that we tend to do is overestimate the present things, the short-term things, but underestimate the long-term things. And I think what Ari's talking about here and what we work a lot with is the long-term things, and how they represent systemic changes that like the pandemic was a shock because it happened, and it happened really fast and we had to adapt. But a lot of the things that we're talking about, they will trickle down bit by bit. And when we look, the bucket will be full and it's going to be completely different than what we have right now. And I think that's the power of looking at epic trends and rethinking the future and being ready, not again to predict, but to do the thinking process and the preparation process. That I think that's a lot of what you do, right, Ari?
Yeah, definitely. You know, the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. I'm a strong believer in that. And I think a lot of people in the foresight space get tied up in trying to scenario plan the future. And I think it's useful to understand the forces of change and the levers, but ultimately you need that inspiring North Star. Yeah, and that's what we do.
Yeah. Sorry, Guy, back to you.
Yay, great. I think, guys, let's make it very organic here. If you have anything to share, I know that JP is dying to say something. So
I'm
jump
dying
in,
to
man.
say something. Like I'm taking notes. I'm learning as we go. But you know, going like the way that you go, reverse in the movie. Like you go reverse on the tape. You just go back. So I'll go back on what Ari commented. Back to the comment that. MP shared with us about her son and the Olympics. But Ari, something that everyone, something that I've heard at Itai's presentation as well is the era of from the CEO to the CDO, right, to the Chief Design Officer, or how you use design thinking and storytelling and projecting the needs of the population, the community, or whoever you want to solve or predict the future. And that's what I've learned, the educational way when I did university, industrial design and visual communication alongside with engineering. And in 1994, that helped, to open my mind, not only on a rational approach, but also on an emotional approach. And that is very powerful that we have today. And what Ari is doing with the sci-fi projection, I think it's very creative. I love it, by the way, and we should talk, let's do business, right? But all in all, and going back to your comment, Guy, around your experience in Dubai and about data, right? Data, as MP was positioning, is the new oil, but we don't know, we cannot do much with oil if we don't turn into plastic, gasoline, cosmetics, or whatever the oil can turn into. So how we use that data and to what purposes, of course, not on a bad way, but in the good way, is where we need to use the technology to get us there. And yes, it is very powerful. And on the way that we can bring experiences, for example, to the comment that MP said about her son watching the Olympics and thinking it's a training practice, right? I'm glad that, it's not live, even though billions of people are watching at the same time. But something that Itai also said on his presentation, always for the future thinking, but I think for life, always seek goosebumps. And I think, Guy, you understand what I'm talking, because when we play live or when we see a live show, we have the goosebumps. And that is only, actually, I believe that we can only achieve that on a live environment, being there, because there's a lot of energy. I also think about religion and exchanging energy and synergies within those around us in a live environment, right? So I think that is unbreakable, even though, MP, to your point, that shift of paradigm will bring new experiences that will give your son goosebumps in different ways using the immersive reality, right? So, but how we tie all these conversations together, I think only Ari can help us answer those questions with his approach. But I wanted to share these thoughts with everyone.
It's amazing. Can you imagine one day when you create a synthetic prime Michael Jordan to play against Wilt Chamberlain and LeBron James, and you can watch it live with another 10 million people around the world? Yeah, it's possible. And the thing is, we build our vision of the world around our own experiences. What happens with the alpha generation that never experienced live shows the way we did, as the only way to connect to the stars, the performers? What kind of relationship they will have? What kind of new reality they will build? What happens when our virtual reality, it's absolutely impossible to tell apart from our physical reality? Are we going to substitute or going to be a complement? What kind of new world are we going to have when we mix all those things like behavioral economy, the future of thinking, interfering with that, creating this new variant of the reality, like Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash book, isn't it, Ari? So yeah, there's so many possibilities here, and some of them are not necessarily positive because they make us grow apart in a way. Like the physical presence still has a lot of power to make us feel part of something bigger. What happens when we are isolated, never actually connected? Just when we have this curated reality that we build as we go.
Yeah, I think.
Who can tell me something about it?
I think what's interesting about where we are as a species, if anyone's read Yuval Harari's work, Sapiens and Homo Deus, he talks a lot about, stories we tell as a species and evolution of us as a species. And I think we're at a very unique time where we have to almost rethink, what do we want to be as human beings? What do we want to stand for? What do we value? And how do we kind of align on those values? How do we organize ourselves around those values? It's like, if you study philosophy or ethics at university 10 or 15 years ago, it was like this obscure degree that you would do, and you might be consulted once in your career. But now it's like, we need ethicists and we need philosophers at the boardroom. We need to be talking about this every single day. What does it mean to be human? It's such an interesting time. And in that, of course, comes opportunity. Like with any challenge or any confrontation, if you can get beyond that successfully, you can get to a much better place. You can springboard. If you've ever dealt with conflict in your life or challenges, when you're going through them, it's not fun, it's difficult. But when you successfully go through them, you've expanded yourself. And that's where I think we are as sorry to get really high level, but in some ways, that's where I think we are. And we're seeing that in the day-to-day, in the kind of unrest movements and kind of people really being dissatisfied with our systems. And as futurists, it's our job to help clean that up and kind of help set the vision, isn't it?
Yeah, Ari, one of the things that you mentioned before, you mentioned briefly about blockchain, and it's really interesting because they connected two dots now on your thoughts, the blockchain and what it means to be human. Because I think I really like your provocation around us rethinking what it means to be human and what are the values that we want in the societies in the future. And one of the things, Guy, that I see with more light than darkness is the technologies that can address and reclaim some of the humanities that we lost. So one of the things that we lost a lot, and I think we're in the process of losing before we get into the process of finding, is trust. And this is a very core human, philosophical human value element, which is what is true, what do I trust, what do we trust? And we lost a lot of the narrative around trust in the last 2 decades, especially with the growth and the pervasion of social media in our lives. So I like to see new technologies, like I said, that bring empathy and inclusion, but I also like to see new technologies as blockchain that reclaim the trust that we lost because of the technology that we have in place. And I really like what you said, Ari, about us being a work in progress. And I think we are a work in progress individually as human organisms, but we're also a work in progress as society and as nations, as companies, and as a global society. And I think what we see here is an evolution, and we're going to see trends and counter trends that are going to screw up some things and then go there and reclaim those things that we lost. And I think we just need to be aware of the things that we're losing so we can break things that reclaim them.
Yeah, it's interesting what you said, MP, because a couple of months ago, the Brazilian Society for the Artificial Intelligence Development invited me to make some suggestions on this answer or this call of the Ministry of Technology in Brazil for creating a framework for the development of artificial intelligence in Brazil. Okay, what I noticed, okay, there was some very interesting points, but what I noticed there is that we're talking about this huge impact that technology has over our lives, and maybe artificial intelligence will be, the biggest engine of change in the next few decades and forever, maybe. And what I saw there is that as addressing this framework, there was we're only talking about scientists, okay, the STEM guys, okay, the guys from science, technology, engineering, okay, the developers. They forgot completely the rest of the society. Where are the anthropologists? Where are the psychologists? Where are the sociologists? Where are the doctors? Where are the musicians? Where's everybody? Okay, because this will affect everybody. This will change the frame of our society. It will change the way we relate to people. And not only artificial intelligence, all these developments, all these trends, they have this huge impact. And what I see is that there's no effort for creating an engagement on this protagonism that would be so necessary to address all these changes that will affect us. And just paraphrasing Tim Cook, Apple's CEO of all people, okay, he said, technology can do amazing things, extraordinary things. It just doesn't want to do amazing things. In fact, technology doesn't want to do anything. So what he means, or what I understand he means, that it's up to us to address that, to say what technology will do for us, instead of being just victims of the changes, this almost random changes that will be the victims in the future.
And bringing together the trust factor, but also remembering a little bit what you said, Guy, around the boundaries between spaces, right? Between real and virtual, something that Roger Spitz put on his presentation. He's calling it liminality, the blurriness around those boundaries. And regarding the trust factor that MP was positioning around the core human philosophical element, Just as a side note, for example, on a cyber security approach here as a Cisco in the market themselves, we have something that we call a zero trust approach for technology, for not trusting, because technology, trusting technology, it's neither binary nor permanent. So our zero trust approach is like when our model prompts us to question assumptions of trust on every access attempt. For example, at the 2014 Olympics, we mitigated 1 billion attacks per second. And now we're also monitoring the Tokyo Olympics and other big events. But to that point, and to the blurriness of what's real and not real moving forward, and having the trust factor with the human aspect, having the trust factor with the machines, I think everything connects well together on the aspect on how should we shape the future that we want for ourselves, for our intellectual properties, for our identity, for our well-being, so that we can use those learnings in the time moving forward. Because as Ari will teach us, sci-fi will happen one way or the other. It's just the way that we're going to paint it in the future. And I think the good news in everything that we have discussed here is that we have the pencil at hand. And that's the most powerful thing that we have as human beings, the pencil at hand.
Yeah. Just one question for you, JP, since you're talking about cybersecurity and you're the esports guy, and man, right now it's building, okay? The momentum is gaining momentum. Millions of dollars are getting in. So how do you deal with this big change that is coming to this area of entertainment and sports at the same time? What's happening?
Yeah, that's a great point, Guy. Specifically around esports, we truly believe that it's disrupting also not only the gaming aspect of it, but the relationship with the leagues, the future of leagues. How will esports will even grow larger than the NFL as we know today. The number of people I used to watch, just a side note, I used to watch my friends playing video games in Nintendo or Atari or whatever, console, because I had fun playing, but I had fun also watching. We just didn't have the streaming capabilities when I was young. I'm 45 now, and I'm saying, when I was maybe 10 to 11 years old, I loved doing that. And now we're just amplifying that. We're scaling in a way that is taking a shape which will turn the events not only on the esports aspect, but I think your point blends well to what esports can bring of value to the traditional sports, where you can blend in esports virtual activation. For example, a virtual Formula One race against a real race that is happening right now in Abu Dhabi against Hamilton. You get the telemetry of the car ingested into your home. You're in your simulator, and you have a side championship of virtual with reality, and then also another one with reality. The Olympics is doing a lot of tests on this with traditional sports, again, cycling and skiing and other, winter sports as well. But I think that blend of the limit between these boundaries of reality and virtual are going to be very blurry, as well as I think MP put very well, that technology should augment the human capabilities. And that is also happening in the sports, in the traditional sports. So I, with my exoskeleton, or I, with my maybe my lack of limbs, can participate in sports that I couldn't participate before, and also compete on both real and virtual environments. So I think it's a conversation for, again, a 1-hour session, but it's a lot of exciting innovation there.
Yeah, I can see that.
Can I
just one question? Jump in, Ari.
Just a quick comment, because it's super inspiring. MP as well. Your comment about trust and blood is super inspiring. But just on that, there was a woman who worked with, I think it was the applied physics labs in Johns Hopkins, and she was a fully paralyzed woman, and they plugged her in so she could fly a flight simulator. And those were some of the most wonderful moments of her life, because all of a sudden she was extended beyond her physical form. And just, JP, it just reminded me of that. It just kind of inspired me of that thought.
This vision is amazing, Ari. I wrote once about the subject, the way connecting our brains to the cloud, expanding our cognitive capabilities beyond our skulls, will give people some new superpowers. People that are stuck inside their bodies, they might be free to do whatever they want. They might empower people to transcend the limitations of our own body. So it's such a beautiful future that might be explored in the the next few years. It's happening now. And just MP, I wanted to ask you, because you are a globetrotter. You started out your career in that crazy country called Brazil, then Silicon Valley, Singapore, and now the Middle East, UAE. As someone that is feeling this pulse of the innovation, transformation, inspiring people to follow your lead, do you think that the future is happening in a very homogeneous way, or it's very different every place you go? How do you feel that?
That's a very good question, Guy. I think it happens at different paces. So I've seen, for example, when I was in the Silicon Valley in 2013, 2014, 15, I saw the whole birth of the sharing economy, the gig economy. So I saw Lyft. I took one of the first Uber rides, was still in a black car. I had people staying in my place via Airbnb, and I stayed in people's place via Airbnb. So it was the whole birth of that concept. And then as I kept in touch with Brazil, for example, I could see this coming here a few years later, and then in Singapore in different ways. So I think it gets to everybody, especially the technology advancements, and with software, the possibilities that we have with smartphones and apps are really exponential, because if you were making like water bottles before and you make them in the US and you want to sell them in Singapore, you have to produce, you have to ship. It's more complicated. But if you have an app that is based on a service that doesn't have assets, then it's much easier to ship and to expand. So I've seen this expansion. I've seen expansion with a lag of like 3 to 5 years in different regions. But I do see the teenagers more like involved with things that are quite similar. So you see the memes, the generation wars now with the okay boomers, the cringe and all of that. Those things, they fly much faster now and get homogeneous, but it's not in principle. You do have cultural differences, you do have regional differences, but you can see this. And the reason you can see this, Guy, and just doing a flip here on what Ari said before around the human values, we're all humans. That is what unites us. So if a technology is addressing a human need or solving a human problem, it will find relevance elsewhere, because elsewhere we have humans. And no matter our cultural differences and our background differences and our religious differences and color and gender and all of that, we are primarily human, and that unites us, and that echoes the technologies and the trends that we see in different places.
Amazing. Guys, unfortunately, we're reaching the end of our panel here. I'd like to invite you to share your final thoughts. I'd like to also to escape somewhere and have a beer with you guys to continue this conversation forever, because it's so cool. So what about you, JP? Final thoughts?
Yeah, and I love what NP was saying. It's not where you're from, but where you're coming from is something that we learned also in another presentation today. So that builds us. And the question ultimately, in my mind, is the question should be why, not why, but rather why not, right? So we always ask us, why should we think about this? Why should we do that? And we should ask us more, why not? Why not disrupt? Because I remember my experience in 1997 in Rio, pitching to a venture capital company. I was, entrepreneuring with 30 people working in the company already at 20 something. And then we built this model to disrupt the music market, selling MP3 within the industry, and they said, "Oh, that's not going to happen. The industry is too strong. The music industry is never, going to go MP3. We're all vinyl, CD, or whatever." And here we are, fast forward many years later, iTunes disrupted, Spotify is disrupting. We're going to have another disruption. So I think we should always think, why not? And just dream about it. Give it the goosebumps.
Great. AP, the science fiction man.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone. Honored to be with you. Very cool conversation. I also wish we could be together, have some beers, and really enjoy it. Take it. But yeah, I mean, I was super inspired by the conversation. MP, really love some of the points you're making about the role of technology in reclaiming human qualities that maybe we've lost. So trust maybe can be reclaimed through blockchain technologies. Empathy, JP, to some of the immersive technologies that you're working on. One of the things that you can do with virtual reality is you can feel what it's like to be somebody who's disabled or somebody who is older and can't move around as frequently. You can create empathy. So I think it would be a great exercise to think about emerging technologies, think about what empowering qualities they can bring, and kind of imagine the future with them really playing out in that way. So we can build trust through blockchain, we can build empathy through immersive technologies like VR, etc. That's my big takeaway. I was super inspired by that idea. But yeah, fantastic conversation. Guy, brilliant hosting and moderating. It's an honor. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. AP, now MP, our brilliant presenter.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you again for the opportunity. I just wanted to close with a message that I think it works for us as individuals, but also in our professionals and social roles, which is something that we said before, that we can't really predict or control the world we live in, but we can control how we react. So I like to see this scenario as a movie. We're not the directors of the movie. We don't get to say if there's going to be a pandemic or not going to be a pandemic, but we are the lead actors and actresses. So we are the ones that can shape the future and prepare ourselves, our families, our communities, our companies and our countries to function better in a world that we design better. And that starts with each of us today, with the decisions that we make today, and with actions that we take today. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Great, fantastic. And just to finish, guys, I like to say that, in a way, we're exposed to a lot of information. And what I like to say as well is that information that doesn't create transformation is just entertainment. So our mission here is stop being just observers. Observers are all these changes that are happening, and become protagonists, creators of the reality we want to live in. Because creating this future, creating this reality is the only way to avoid becoming obsolete and irrelevant. So just embrace this role and let's change the world together. Thank you very much, guys. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's just the perfect way to end our event. Thank you so much to MP, Guy, JP, and Ari for all the inspiration. Also, thanks to everyone that joined and to all our guests that made it such a special encounter and went this extra mile getting engaged and promoting our event. We hope you had a great time, as we did. Also, if you know anyone that could be a future hacker and get featured in our podcast, drop us a line. Besides those amazing experts all around the world that we've been talking to, we're looking for young minds between the age of 12 and 18 years old to be featured in our Young Hackers project. We have many plans around Future Hacker, so just stay tuned.
A special thanks to our STCom team that make this event possible. Make sure you follow us in your podcast player and social platform as LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. If you or your company are interested to support us and expand our voice, just talk to us. Let's take charge of our future together. Future us.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. See you.